This is a clip from Basketball at the Bar Live. Calvin, the Brooklyn Nets are hanging out with LeBron in Cancun, or they're fishing somewhere else. They get eliminated. They get swept 4-0. They were the odds-on favorite to win the title this season. Lots of drama surrounding Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Ben Simmons. They just can't seem to get away from it. Now it's swirling around KD and Steve Nash. It's really tough for them. But Calvin, I think we can all agree, they massively underperformed this season. I would list them as probably the most disappointing team in the NBA. The Lakers are also up there too.
Yeah.
But, we're hearing about Steve Nash potentially getting fired or being on the hot seat. I know KD came to his defense. I saw an interview with Kyrie Irving that says he wants to continue to be involved with Kevin and Sean and Joe in managing this team. Yes. He used a weird word there, managing this team.
Yes.
But the interesting thing in this interview was he did not mention Steve Nash.
Not once.
And when Steve Nash got hired, he had the infamous quote of like, what do you mean we got a head coach? I could be a coach. KD could be a coach. Blah, blah, blah could be a coach. What are your thoughts on this situation?
Well, first of all, yes, they are a disappointing team this year. Absolutely. They underperformed, underachieved, all of that stuff. A lot of it was their own doing. So I think you have to take that into account. I also feel like this time of year is a very popular and usual time for people to overreact to certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that the Nets collapse or the Nets season shouldn't be taken seriously, and they should look, very closely at what they need to do to make sure that doesn't happen again. However, when you look at the entire year, not having Kyrie Irving for well more than half the season, Durant missed a lot of time. Joe Harris was out for pretty much the whole year. They trade James Harden at the deadline for a guy that ends up not playing a game for them.
Mm-hmm.
This team, I think if you bring everybody back next year, there's still a lot of high hopes that this team can compete for a title. They're going to have to be a better defensive team. They're obviously going to need some more shooting, which they get back with guys like Joe Harris.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben Simmons is the wild card for me here because he's the one that could help have an immediate impact on their defensive game. He could really make things easier for Kyrie and KD because of his ball handling and his passing ability. But he's the biggest question mark of anybody in the sports world right now. I just don't – there's no expectation for him whatsoever at this point. So that to me is where the Nets season lies next year. It's not KD, it's not Kyrie, assuming that COVID doesn't become a major problem again next year. But Ben Simmons is officially the key to whether or not this team can compete for a title, which is a scary thing to say.
I'm going to disagree with you here, Calvin. And the reason I say that is Kyrie Irving has a $36 million player option for next season. We've heard him make promises to teams in the past that he's going to re-sign and then not follow through with that, and that mainly being the Boston Celtics. Does he opt in for this $36 million? Does he try and work out a new contract with the Nets? What do the Nets want from him in a contract, right? Like, in a perfect world, if I'm the Nets, he opts into this $36 million, right? Because we're only tied for 1 year. But from Kyrie's perspective, he probably wants some long-term, promises as far as salary and stuff like that. If I'm the Nets, how much money am I really willing to give this guy? He's only 30 years old, a phenomenal player, but we've seen all these other outside distractions. Like you said, he missed more than half the games this season. So is he a half a max contract type guy? He's as of right now, he's eligible to play all of next season. But we don't know if rules are going to change.
Yeah.
He's also had injury concerns his entire career. I don't think he's played a full season in his entire career. We saw it in Duke, all these issues. I was just talking about on the last episode, Ramadan and him not eating or drinking during the daytime. Whatever your religious, opinions or beliefs are, like, I'm not a person to knock on any of those at all. Like, that's just not part of something that I do. But at the same time, you know, like, this is your job, right? Like, if I'm a pastor at a church, am I going to be a Sunday football analyst? No, because they conflict, right? And it's not like the NFL is like, oh, if you're religious, we don't want you on our broadcast. It's just like a straight up, it doesn't work together, you know? So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Kyrie Irving moving on. But on the subject of salary cap and looking at the roster here, I just kind of want to break down everything, and then we can talk about things that they do need to improve, things that they can do this offseason to potentially get back to the finals or be competitive next season. You know, KD signed that new contract extension last season, so he's locked up for the next 4 years, $42 million, almost $43 million next season and the season after that. Then 49, and then 53. As I mentioned, Kyrie Irving has that $36 million player option. Ben Simmons is locked up for 3 more years, $33 million, $36 million, $38 million. Joe Harris hopefully returns from this injury healthy. You mentioned shooting. He's locked up for 2 more years. Then you have Seth Curry, also a great shooter, locked up for $8 million. Patty Mills has got a $6 million player option. Other than that, this team doesn't really have much. You have a rookie in Cam Thomas and Day'Ron Sharpe. Both of those guys didn't play a single minute that I saw in the playoffs.
Yeah, kind of surprised. Well, not Day'Ron Sharpe, but Cam Thomas has been a pretty important guy off the bench for them for scoring all year long. So I'm a little surprised they didn't try to give him some run. But we'll talk about that too, because I got couple other guys I was interested about Steve Nash's rotation here.
Okay. I mean, we got guys like Bruce Brown, LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond, Nick Claxton, Gordon Dragic. They're all expiring. They've all been pretty instrumental pieces outside of LaMarcus Aldridge. Didn't play much this season. But, you know, if I were to just say next season if Kyrie opts in, we got KD, Kyrie, Ben Simmons, Joe Harris, Seth Curry. That's a decent starting 5.
Sure is.
There's no center in there, but I think that's okay. KD's a big body. Ben Simmons is a big guy. I think that starting 5 could work. And we've seen a lot of these super teams basically worry about their starting 5, maybe their 6-man, and then kind of add veteran minimum players on top of that to try and make things work. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling that Blake Griffin's probably going to be one of those guys that's going to return to the team. But I just want to hear your thoughts on this roster. What's going on with Kyrie Irving? Do you expect them to make any moves in free agency or big moves, or are they just kind of filling it out with veteran guys?
I assume they're going to kind of fill it out with veteran guys. You know, I think that's generally what you see on these quote-unquote super teams. You have a bunch of guys at the top making a crap ton of money, and then it's just how can you fill in the rest of the roster with veterans or minimum salary pieces. As far as the roster goes, you know, Kyrie Irving is much like being Ben Simmons, a big question mark, and you really never know what next move he's going to make.
Never.
$36 million is a lot of money, so I would assume after hearing him talk, I mean, we know that maybe he's not the most reliable person to listen to what he says, but I think he means it when he says he's here with Kevin. I think those two guys have a pretty close bond together. So if I had to guess, I would say he does opt in for this contract, or he tries to negotiate another one with Brooklyn rather than leaving. But my biggest question for the roster is, what do they do with the front line of this team?
Yeah.
Because a lot of these guys are aging now. LaMarcus Aldridge is 36 years old. Blake Griffin's 33. They've got a couple other guys that are getting up in age as well. Goran Dragic is 35. Patty Mills is 33. So are they going to look to try to get younger at some of the center or the forward position, whether it's in the draft or free agency or a trade? Nick Claxton is only 23, so he's still got a lot of upside.
He struggled hard.
He did
man.
struggle big time in this game.
Hack a clack.
And we saw them start the series playing Andre Drummond a bunch. Mm-hmm. They realized that they couldn't really roll with him because he was too big and couldn't cover enough space defensively to stay with the Boston front court. And then to counteract that, I expected to see a lot more of Blake Griffin in this series, but he only played in 2 games.
Yep.
I thought he would have really helped them be physical on the boards, which they really needed in this series. So they do have a ton of question marks, particularly when it comes to the forward and center spot, I think, going into next year.
Yeah, they traded their pick to Houston for James Harden. That was pick number 17. They will be receiving pick. Right now it's slotted at 23, depending on how Philadelphia does here. But they need to make some moves. They need to make something happen. Because the window, as you mentioned, is closing. These guys are getting older, and KD's dealt with some serious injuries. Kyrie's been injured. Ben Simmons is injured. Joe Harris is injured. Yeah. It's like injury, right?
This team had the most starting lineup combinations of any team in the league this year.
Wow, that's truly incredible. You want to make a prediction on where you think they'll rank next year in the standings?
That's tough because the Eastern Conference is now loaded with teams that are probably going to be around for a few years and be at a really high level. So, we saw Brooklyn early on this season kind of get out to a good start, and they were the number one seed in the Eastern Conference for a little while. It was short-lived, but they were still up there. I'm not so sure. Unfortunately, I got to go back to Ben Simmons because to me, whether or not he comes back at a high level and really changes how that team plays defensively, all that stuff, that's going to impact or have a huge impact and trickle down effects on how good the Nets are going to be next year. So if Ben Simmons is, all-star level Ben Simmons that we've seen in the past, this team could easily be a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I expect them to make the playoffs, and that's just based on the fact that they have Kevin Durant, right? But at the same time, I never bet against LeBron James missing the playoffs. He missed the playoffs this season. We saw, 2 seasons ago, missed the playoffs. 3 seasons ago, missed the playoffs. So it will be a very interesting offseason for the Brooklyn Nets. All right, moving on. Thank you so much for watching. As always, please don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can join us live every single weekday, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And also, don't forget to tip your bartender.